It seems that some games are the living proof that you do not need a billion-dollar budget to conquer the world or even sell millions of copies. In the midst of an industry that values mainly AAA graphics and gaming trends, there are some incredible indie games that, with sharpened creativity and a great deal of passion, have touched the hearts of many players around the world. Not only that, but they also surprisingly broke sales records, achieving numbers that would make many blockbusters jealous. So, for this video, we have compiled the top 10 best-selling indie games in history. From exciting adventures to chaotic experiences that have become a worldwide craze, and each of these titles is special and worth visiting. The selection resulted in a pretty fascinating list that demonstrates how small ideas can become global phenomena, and the indie spirit can be as powerful as any major franchise. In the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, when everyone was living in lockdown and craving for something that could distract them, Fall Guys launched and took the world by storm, myself included. It's a multiplayer title with a pretty simple premise. Dozens of players are put in colorful arenas to face chaotic minigames. The last one standing after a few rounds is the winner. Also, it's light humor. You play as colorful beans, for God's sake. And fast-paced matches are simply irresistible. It is extremely fun to play solo or with friends. The game basically exploded in popularity and became an instant hit among players and streamers at the time, ending up selling over 11 million copies before migrating to a free-to-play model a few years later in 2022.
If you were an active gamer by January 2024, you know that everyone was playing, or at least talking about, Palworld. It is a survival multiplayer game with a lot of similarities to Pokemon, where you explore an open-world map in search of collecting creatures known as pals, who are used for battle, farming, trading, and crafting. However, it has a crucial difference. It has guns! That crazy idea alone attracted many curious people worldwide, reaching a peak of 2.1 million concurrent players just a few days after its early access launch. Although the full release has not yet taken place, all that hype has already led to Palworld to sell around 15 million copies, ranking 9th in the charts.
Developed by just 3 people and funded by a Kickstarter campaign, Hollow Knight is an amazing Metroidvania. Disclaimer, I'll fanboy a little bit because it is one of my favorite games ever, that ended up becoming an absolute benchmark in the genre. The game is quite impressive on its own, with interconnected biomes to explore, complex gameplay, a memorable soundtrack, unforgettable bosses, a melancholic atmosphere, a mysterious plot, and even hand-drawn art. Also, its low budget was responsible for some of its most praised elements, such as the minimalist art, lack of voice dialogues, and replay factor, being a great example of how an independent game can redefine standards and become a modern classic. All of that resulted in more than 15 million copies sold all around the world, and a sequel, Hollow Knight Silksong, which took 6 years to be developed, and was one of the most anticipated titles of the decade.
Rust is one of the biggest multiplayer hits on the indie scene, with over 16 million copies sold, ranking 7th in the charts. It began as an early access survival experiment in 2013, but quickly became a global phenomenon, mixing elements of crafting, exploration, and PvP combat in a hostile open-world map, where encounters with other players can mean either teamwork or betrayal. And its popularity hasn't slowed down, quite the contrary. After its full release in 2018, the game continued to build up a passionate fanbase with its challenging mechanics and weird premise that prioritized players' freedom, also being a perfect pick for streamers. Over the years, and thanks to its community and constant updates, Rust has become a benchmark in the online survival genre, not only inside the indie bubble, but the gaming industry as a whole.
You may not have played Castle Crashers yet, but you have definitely seen its colorful, quirky characters somewhere else. This is an absolute classic of the indie scene because it was not only a commercial success, but also helped pave the way for the rise of the independent market on consoles after being launched on the Xbox Live Arcade during the Xbox 360 era. It is a chaotic beat-em-up with accessible controls and a cartoonish aesthetic, supporting up to 4 players. I love that it is just simple and incredibly fun to play with friends in any circumstances, since it is not the type of multiplayer that could ruin a night because someone is on a bad day. That said, Castle Crashers defends a solid 6th place in the charts with more than 20 million copies sold across its various versions.
One of the subgenres that I love the most is horror with laughs. And Phasmophobia is probably my favorite one that masters this idea. Created by a single developer, it is basically a cooperative horror game where you and your friends need to investigate a series of haunted locations to identify the ghost that is lurking around. You use different types of equipment and a lot of courage to do that, and things scale quickly from a horrifying experience to laughing your ass off, since the game has a cool proximity-based voice chat and you need to keep quiet during hunts, but that may be hard with friends around. In any case, Phasmophobia is a huge global success, especially among streamers, for offering a unique co-op title. No wonder it has sold more than 22 million copies. Stardew Valley, also known as the most popular farming game in the world, which you probably already played and put thousands of hours into, is one of the greatest examples of an insanely successful independent game. It was developed by a solo developer called Eric Barone, and basically reinvented the farming simulation genre by mixing a farmer's life with relationships, mining, and RPG elements in a captivating world full of personality. So, with its freedom to farm, attention to detail, constant updates, and tons of fun and relaxing content, it won a legion of passionate fans, establishing itself as a modern classic and a cultural phenomenon, since it attracts even non-gamers. Its impact was huge at launch, and still is to this day. It has more than 41 million copies sold throughout the entire world, and counting, ranking 4th in the charts.
Do not let its colorful, quirky visuals fool you. Human Fall Flat is an absolute giant in the indie scene, especially for being extremely popular in China. Its premise is to put players in control of malleable characters with deliberately clumsy controls, while trying to overcome obstacles on their way and deal with challenging platforming sequences that deal a lot with gravity. You can play solo or with 7 other players online. Either way, it results in hilarious moments and pure chaos. Betting all on this simple yet insanely fun idea, the 80 game has sold over 55 million copies around the world, while also becoming a benchmark when it comes to cooperative fun.
Occupying the 2nd place, we have Minecraft, a global phenomenon about getting completely lost on an island and managing to survive with your creativity only. And it is probably being played by one of your nephews as we speak. It basically redefined the concept of the modern sandbox at the time of its launch by allowing players to explore, build, and create their own experience with an infinite world of blocks. It is simple, accessible, and a huge commercial success. However, for this ranking, we are considering only sales that happened before Mojang was purchased by Microsoft in October 2014, since that kind of makes the game leave the indie territory. So, well off Microsoft swings, Minecraft sold around 60 million copies, which is pretty impressive for a game that was created by a solo developer. And hey, if you do count the total sales for Minecraft, you have the best-selling game of all time, with more than 350 million copies sold so far. You could describe Terrarria as a mix of Minecraft with RPG, but I do not think that does justice to what this incredible indie game can offer, since it also has some sandbox and platformer elements.
It combines action, exploration, and creativity in a virtually infinite 2D universe, which has won and cultivated fans all over the world with its balance between construction, challenging combat, and progression full of discoveries. While doing that, Terrarria has sold over 60.7 million copies and established itself as one of the most successful independent titles in history. Its impact is so enduring that, even after more than a decade, it continues to receive updates, to have an active community, and to be a true pillar of the indie scene.